Hello, you wonderful people. Welcome to another episode of Bring It Back. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that were canceled or short-lived that I'd like to see get brought back in some shape or form. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Netflix series, The Brother's Son. Really quickly, if you're unfamiliar with the series, basically, it revolves around this family that's at the heart of this. I mean, they're kind of the main head honchos of this sort of Taiwanese gang slash triad. Basically, you had the oldest son, Charles, in Taiwan after their dad is kind of attacked and he's kind of out of the picture because he's kind of in a coma. It's up to Charles to kind of keep his promise, and that's protecting his little brother Bruce as well as his mom, both of who relocated to America like what 15 years prior to the story or something like that. And so it's basically two worlds colliding because Bruce doesn't remember much from his childhood, so he doesn't know what his family was mixed up in. And so it's this clashing of Charles, who knows this world so much, dragging his brother, who's just kind of your everyday dude who wants to do improv, but his mom wants him to go to college to become a doctor, and both worlds kind of colliding as his mom's trying to juggle things, showing how things should be done, teaching both her sons. She wants Bruce to have nothing to do with this world, but she's showing Charles she knows a lot more about this world than he gives her credit, because he's like, oh, you've been removed from this too long, not recognizing like, right, I've had my role to play in all of this. You're just kind of, you've got your way of doing things, and you're very much like your dad, but me, I have my own special role. And as the show progresses, you kind of find out what their mom's role is and everything. I mean, obviously their mom, if you're unaware, is played by Michelle Yeoh, which is dope in itself. But it's this really interesting action crime drama, comedy crime drama, I should clarify. It's a funny show, but it's this really beautiful story in a way, you know, about family and kind of rediscovering family. And like I said, clashing of worlds, as Charles, who's lived this gangster life for so long, is hanging around his brother, and, you know, it kind of brings him back to like the normal world, whereas his brother, Bruce, who's been disconnected and away from all of this, is now kind of getting deeper into this world. It's about kind of the clashing of being who you want to be versus what others expect you to be. It just ends up being that interesting story, and just kind of this, like I said, action filled, shenanigan filled, like adventure. Sadly, the show was canceled a couple days ago at the time of me recording this. News came out, which is such a bummer, because from what I picked up online and what I was seeing at the time, the show was generally well received. Once again, that could just be my algorithm telling me that, just reconfirming what I mean, I really enjoy this show. I know some people didn't, and that's perfectly fine, but generally speaking, it seemed like the show was well received. I think it just comes down to simply not enough people watched it, which is such a bummer, because it's a really good show, and I would have loved to have seen where it goes next, because the show's in this interesting spot. Without spoiling it, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, should it matter now that it's canceled? But where the season ends, it's in this interesting spot where like the entire story for the most part has kind of been resolved. Obviously there's enough loose threads obviously to set up a season 2, but if you had to, and I think I even said this at the time, if they had to end it there, they could, but obviously there's room for more story because there is stuff left open. But like for the most part, the story that you over the course of season 1 is pretty much resolved with some threads that can continue over. You could easily interpret it as like, even if we don't get any more of the show, you could say like, well, the story we set out to tell is done, but it's like, well, it's really not done, with some of the stuff and storylines unresolved in some capacity. It's resolved in others, but it's just that thing of like, once again, I'm always going to want more, never less. So I'm always going to wish there was more of this show. It doesn't seem like it'd be a show that would run for a very long time with the nature of the story. Me personally, I could feel it being like only 2 or 3 seasons long, you know. And once again, that also depends on the creators, like how much story did they have prepared and how much do they have ready, like how much of a plan did they have? Did they only have like ideas up to a season 2, and you know, stuff like that, because it just depends on what direction the story goes and what twists and turns it takes that could have like stretched it out. But I could definitely see this being like a 2, maybe 3 season show at bare minimum. If they want to make more, sure, I wouldn't fight them, but I could definitely feel the story being just allocated to that. But like I said, it just depends on the direction the stories would have gone, and it would have been interesting to see where season 2 would have gone, where these characters would have gone after all their changes over the course of season 1, and what the Sun family would have gone through with the changes that had happened over the course of the first season for both our characters, as you know, both the brothers Charles and Bruce, and what their relationship is at the end of it, and who they are as individuals at the end of it, and their mom's story was going to be really interesting to see that going forward. So it is a Netflix situation, so it's very unlikely. I think it's super rare of Netflix ever changing their mind once they canceled something. I think I know of one instance off the top of my head. I think didn't they cancel Warrior Nun, but then like enough petitions and stuff got the show to come back for another season? I think I remember that being the case. Even if that's, I swear I remember that's the case, but either way, like, it doesn't happen that often. Usually Netflix is the whole, oh, this show got canceled on network television, maybe it'll get a second home here. I mean, there's always a possibility another streamer could pick it up, but once again, it also depends on Netflix and whether they're willing to give up the rights to that type of stuff. It's like, they already spent the money on the show, would they be willing to give it to someone else for them to make money off of? That becomes a whole conversation. So it just seems, my whole point is, it seems super unlikely. I have my fingers crossed that something can happen. Maybe I just don't think the show's in a position where it can be shopped anywhere else, but I don't know the ins and outs of the deals and stuff like that and how Netflix operates. That's just an assumption on my part. I'm not well educated enough to say that, but like, if it's possible, I'd love the show to find a new home potentially or, you know, like I said, it's unlikely Netflix will change their mind, so I'd rather potentially find another home and be able to tell the story at least they want to tell, you know, whether it is just in one more season or 2 more seasons, whatever the case may be. I would want the show to continue, but just where things currently stand, it seems super, super unlikely. So really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good